She spoke 3 words in perfect Arabic and suddenly became the most dangerous woman in Atlanta. The Lebanese restaurant buzzed with its usual Thursday night crowd when the Middle Eastern couple at table 7 started raising their voices. The husband gestured wildly at the menu while his wife shook her head, both of them looking lost and frustrated. Other diners turned to stare. The manager stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable. Have you ever felt the moment when everyone's eyes land on you at once? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. Tasha balanced 3 plates on her left arm and walked over like she did this every day. Madadakalu fil Kalik, she said softly. Don't worry about it. The entire restaurant went silent. When you realize you just revealed something you meant to keep hidden. That's exactly what happened to Tasha Williams that night. Because black waitresses in downtown Atlanta don't usually speak fluent Arabic, and billionaires sitting in corner booths don't usually pay attention to waitresses. But Clayton Reeve was paying attention to everything. The couple's faces lit up with relief. The woman grabbed Tasha's free hand and started talking rapidly in Arabic about their daughter's wedding menu, how nothing made sense, how they felt stupid and embarrassed. Tasha listened, nodded, then turned to the kitchen and rattled off their order in perfect Lebanese dialect. She walked back to her station like nothing happened. But something had changed. She could feel eyes on her back, could sense the shift in the room's energy. 3 tables were whispering. The manager looked confused, and the man in the expensive suit at table 12, the one who'd been nursing the same glass of wine for an hour, was staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. Do you know someone who's been hiding a skill because revealing it felt dangerous? Someone whose past makes them keep their talents locked away? Because some people learn languages out of love. Others learn them to survive. Tasha learned Arabic living with her stepfather in Dearborn, Michigan, back when she was 16 and thought family meant safety. Before she discovered that some secrets can get you killed, and some people will do anything to keep those secrets buried. She tried to avoid the corner table for the rest of her shift. But Clayton Reeve wasn't the kind of man you could ignore. 6'2", silver threading through dark hair, the kind of quiet confidence that comes from having serious money. His untouched salmon sat getting cold while he made notes in a leather portfolio. When she finally approached his table, her hands were shaking. "Can I get you anything else?" she asked. He looked up, and his eyes were the color of storm clouds. "You're very talented," he said. His voice was low, controlled. "How many languages do you speak?" "Just English and a little Arabic." The lie came easy. She'd been practicing it for 13 years. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Impressive, especially for someone from Atlanta. Her stomach dropped, because she'd never told anyone at work where she was really from. Her application said Atlanta born and raised. So how did this stranger know she was lying? "I need to get back to work," she said. "Of course." He closed his portfolio and stood up, dropping 200s on the table. "Have a good evening, Tasha." He knew her name. She hadn't worn a name tag in 6 months. She watched him walk toward the exit, every instinct screaming danger. Rich men didn't eat alone at Lebanese restaurants on Thursday nights. They didn't leave massive tips for untouched food, and they definitely didn't know things about waitresses they'd never met before. What would you do if someone was watching you with recognition you couldn't place? If it knew details about your life that should have been impossible to discover? Because sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. Sometimes it walks into your restaurant wearing a $3,000 suit and orders food it doesn't plan to eat. When Tasha went back to clear his table 20 minutes later, Clayton was gone. In his place, a folded note, $10,000 in cash, and a one-way plane ticket to Boston. The note had 5 words written in precise handwriting. "You're needed. 6 Uhr morgens shop." She stared at the money. More cash than she'd seen in her entire life, sitting next to her dirty plates like it belonged there. The plane ticket was for tomorrow morning. First class. Her hands started trembling as she picked up the note, looking for more information, some explanation that would make this make sense. That's when she saw it. Written in smaller letters at the bottom, almost like an afterthought, "Amira remembers you." The plate slipped from her hands and shattered against the floor. Because Amira was the name of a little girl she'd loved like a daughter 13 years ago. A little girl who died in a car accident in Dearborn, Michigan. A little girl whose death had made Tasha pack everything she owned and disappear to Atlanta the next day. If this story is already getting under your skin, hit that like button. Trust me, you haven't seen anything yet. Because some secrets are buried so deep, it takes a billionaire to dig them up. She stood there staring at broken ceramic and wondering how a dead child could remember anyone. Wondering how a stranger could know about the worst day of her life. Wondering if she was brave enough or stupid enough to get on that plane. But mostly wondering why her heart was racing with something that felt almost like hope. The richest man in Wyoming doesn't fly to Atlanta for Lebanese food. He flies there to find ghosts. Tasha sat in her studio apartment at 2 a.m., staring at the plane ticket like it might explode. The $10,000 lay spread across her coffee table in neat hundreds, more money than her monthly rent times 3. She'd already Googled Clayton Reeve 17 times, and each search result made her stomach twist tighter. Tech billionaire, defense contractor, government advisor, Wyoming ranch owner, net worth, undisclosed, but estimated over $2 billion. The kind of man who appeared in Forbes articles about America's most reclusive entrepreneurs and Senate hearings about military contracts. What would you do if a stranger left you enough money to change your life? If they knew secrets about your past that should have been impossible to discover? Because when billionaires take interest in waitresses, someone always pays the price. She clicked through photo after photo. Clayton at state dinners, always in the background. Clayton testifying before Congress about cybersecurity, his face giving away nothing. Clayton at charity galas, standing alone while everyone else smiled for cameras. But it was the last photo that made her blood run cold. A grainy image from a newspaper archive, dated 14 years ago. State Department officials visit Dearborn Refugee Center. And there in the background, younger but unmistakably him, was Clayton Reeve shaking hands with her stepfather Kareem. Her laptop screen blurred as tears filled her eyes. She slammed it shut and grabbed her phone, fingers shaking as she dialed information. "I need the number for the State Department," she said. "Which department, ma'am?" "Refugee Services, or anyone who worked with refugees in Michigan between 2010 and 2012. 20 minutes and 6 transfers later, she hung up with nothing. Every office was closed. Every number led to voicemail. Every voicemail said to call back during business hours, like her entire world wasn't falling apart at 2:30 in the morning. Have you ever felt someone watching you with recognition you couldn't place? Like they knew something about you that you'd forgotten about yourself? Because sometimes the people hunting your past aren't trying to hurt you. Sometimes they're trying to heal something that never should have been broken. Meanwhile, 3 time zones away in Wyoming, Clayton Reeve stood at his penthouse office window, looking out at mountains that stretched toward Canada. His desk was covered with files marked classified and eyes only, but the one that mattered lay open in the center. A thick manila folder with Williams, Natasha, Refugee Interpreter Program, written across the tab. Inside were photos of 16-year-old Tasha translating for families at the Dearborn Center. Reports about her exceptional Arabic skills and mature handling of traumatic stories. And at the bottom, a single page that had haunted him for 3 years. An incident report dated October 15, 2011. Subject witnessed vehicular collision resulting in death of minor Amira Hassan, age 4. Subject provided statement to local police before disappearing for program. Current whereabouts unknown. File closed pending further investigation. Clayton had been hunting that file for 13 years. Not because he was investigating Tasha, but because he'd been investigating everyone else. The adoption agency, the social workers, the State Department officials who'd signed off on emergency placements. And what he'd found made him want to burn down half the government. His secure phone buzzed with a text from his head of security. Subject researching your background. 17 Google searches in last hour. She's scared but curious. Flight leaves in 4 hours. Think she'll show. Clayton typed back, she'll show. She has to. Because what Tasha didn't know yet was that Amira Hassan hadn't died in that car crash. She'd been extracted, relocated, and placed with a Syrian family as part of a classified program that traded refugee children for political intelligence. And for 13 years, she'd been asking about the teenage girl who'd held her hand and promised everything would be okay. Do you think she should trust Clayton or run? What's your gut telling you? Because sometimes the enemy of your enemy becomes the most dangerous ally you'll ever have. Back in Atlanta, Tasha paced her apartment until sunrise. She'd packed a bag, then unpacked it. She'd torn up the plane ticket, then taped it back together. She'd counted the money 6 times, as if the numbers would change and make this whole situation make sense. At 5 a.m., she called in sick to work. At 5:15, she was in an Uber heading toward the airport, her hands gripping the ticket so tight her knuckles went white. The private terminal looked like something from a movie, all glass and marble, and people in expensive suits who talked in whispers. She gave her name to the woman at the desk, half expecting to be told this was all some kind of joke. "Ms. Williams," the woman smiled. "Right this way. Mr. Reeve is waiting." Her heart hammered against her ribs as she followed the woman through doors marked "Authorized Personnel Only." Because this was it, the point of no return. Whatever happened next would either give her answers or destroy what was left of her carefully constructed life. The hangar doors opened to reveal a private jet, its engines already running. And standing at the bottom of the steps, looking exactly like his photos, but somehow more real, more dangerous, was Clayton Reeve. He was younger than she'd expected, taller too, and when he looked at her, she saw something in his eyes that made her chest tight. Recognition mixed with guilt, like he knew exactly how much this was going to hurt her. "Thank you for coming," he said, extending his hand. His voice was deeper in person, rougher around the edges. "I know this seems impossible, but I promise you, everything you're about to learn is true." She looked at his outstretched hand, then at the plane behind him, then at the life she was about to leave behind in Atlanta. Comment below, should she get on that plane? Because what happens next will change everything you think you know about love, loss, and the lies governments tell to protect their secrets. She thought she'd buried Dearborn 13 years ago, until a billionaire dug up her grave. The plane lifted off from Atlanta like a silver bullet shot toward her past. Tasha pressed her face against the window and watched Georgia disappear beneath clouds, every mile taking her closer to answers she wasn't sure she wanted. Clayton sat across from her in leather seats that probably cost more than her car. He hadn't said much since takeoff, just handed her coffee and a manila folder thick with papers she was afraid to open. "Tell me about Kareem," he said finally. Her stepfather's name hit like a punch to the chest. She hadn't spoken it out loud in 13 years. Have you ever had to choose between loyalty and survival? Between protecting someone you loved and protecting yourself? Because sometimes the family that saves you also destroys you. "How do you know about Kareem?" she asked. "I met him in 2010. State Department contract work, helping refugees navigate the system. He mentioned his stepdaughter, who spoke better Arabic than most of his friends from Algeria." Tasha closed her eyes and let herself remember. She was 15 when her mom married Kareem Ben Ali, a gentle man with sad eyes who'd fled Algeria during the Civil War. He worked double shifts at a Detroit auto plant and sent money to relatives back home, but evenings belonged to refugee families who needed someone to translate their stories. "He taught you more than language," Clayton said. It wasn't a question. She nodded. "He taught me that words could save lives. That being between two cultures meant you could build bridges for people who were lost." The memory came back sharp and clear. Sitting in community centers while families poured out their hearts in Arabic, trusting her to carry their pain into English and make American officials understand. Birth certificates lost in bombing. Children separated at borders. Husbands who disappeared into government detention centers. "You were good at it," Clayton said. "The reports say you were exceptional, mature beyond your years, protective of the families you worked with. Where are you getting these reports?" Instead of answering, he opened his own folder and slid a photograph across the narrow table between their seats. Black and white, slightly blurred, but unmistakably her at 16. She was kneeling next to a small girl with dark curls, both of them laughing at something outside the camera's view. Amira Hassan, Clayton said quietly. Age 4. Brought to the center in October 2011 after her parents were killed in Damascus. Placed temporarily with the Khalil family while her paperwork was processed. Tasha's hands shook as she picked up the photo. She was so scared when she arrived. Wouldn't speak to anyone for 3 days. But she loved Disney movies, especially The Little Mermaid. I used to sing part of your world to her in Arabic. What happens when running away becomes its own prison? Well, the people you're trying to protect end up protecting you instead. Because some bonds can't be broken by distance, time, or even death. What happened the day she died? Clayton asked. The question she'd been avoiding for 13 years. The reason she'd fled Dearborn, changed her phone number, never contacted Kareem again. The reason she'd spent 13 years waiting tables instead of using her languages to help people. The Khalils were driving her to a doctor's appointment. Routine checkup, nothing serious. I was supposed to go with him to translate, but I had the flu. Her voice cracked. If I'd been there, maybe I could have. Could have what? I don't know. Something. Anything. Clayton leaned forward, his storm cloud eyes intense. Tasha, there was no car accident. The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire she couldn't see. What are you talking about? The Khalil family did die in a car crash that day, but Amira wasn't with them. She'd been removed from their custody 3 hours earlier by federal agents working a classified operation. The plane hit turbulence, or maybe she was falling apart. That's impossible. I saw the police report. I saw her name on the casualty list. You saw what they wanted you to see. Documents can be falsified. Witnesses can be silenced. 16-year-old interpreters who ask too many questions can be scared into disappearing. She wanted to scream, to call him a liar, to demand he turn the plane around. But deep in her chest, something that had been twisted tight for 13 years was starting to loosen. Because she'd never actually seen Amira's body. She'd been told the crash was too severe, the victims too damaged for viewing. She'd been handed a death certificate and a trauma counselor's business card and told to go home and grieve. Where is she? The words came out as a whisper. Clayton reached into his jacket and pulled out a second photograph. This one was recent, high resolution, obviously taken from a distance. A beautiful teenage girl with Amira's same dark eyes, sitting in what looked like a school cafeteria, laughing with friends. Damascus, he said. She's 17 now. Speaks 4 languages. And according to my sources, she's been asking about you for years. Share in the comments. What would make you abandon everything and start over? Because sometimes the truth is more dangerous than any lie you've ever told yourself. As Tasha stared at the photo of the girl she'd mourned, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message was short, in Arabic, and made her heart stop. Mama Tasha, I knew you were alive. I'm coming home. The little girl in the photo had died in her arms, or so she'd been told. Tasha stared at the text message until the Arabic letters blurred together. Her phone shook in her hands like it was alive, dangerous, electric with possibility. How is she texting me? She whispered. How does she have my number? Clayton's expression was carefully neutral, the way politicians looked when they were about to deliver bad news. She doesn't. I sent that message. The betrayal hit harder than she expected. You're lying to me, playing games with a dead child's memory. Amira isn't dead, Tasha, but she might be soon if we don't move fast. Have you ever lost someone and never gotten closure? Never got to say goodbye? Never got to explain why you failed them? Because some reunions are worth risking everything for. But what if the reunion isn't what you think it is? The plane began its descent toward Boston, and through the window, she could see the city spreading below them like a circuit board, all lights and connections and paths that led to places she wasn't ready to go. Tell me everything, she said, from the beginning. And if you lie to me again, I'm walking off this plane and disappearing for another 13 years. Clayton opened his folder wider, revealing surveillance photos, government documents, and reports stamped with classifications she'd only seen in movies. The refugee interpreter program was a front, he said. Kids like Amira weren't being adopted by loving families. They were being placed strategically with handlers who could use them later. Use them for what? Intelligence, cultural access, political leverage. Take a 4-year-old Syrian girl, place her with a connected family in Damascus. Let her grow up believing she's their daughter. By the time she's a teenager, she has access to social circles and information that would take trained operatives years to infiltrate. Tasha's stomach lurched, and it wasn't from the plane's movement. You're talking about children? Babies. I'm talking about a program that treated children like assets, and you're getting too close to figuring it out.
The memory came back in pieces. Her growing suspicions about some of the families. Questions about why certain children were placed so quickly while others waited months. The way social workers changed the subject when she asked about follow-up visits. The day Amira was supposed to die, you'd started asking the wrong people the right questions, Clayton continued. So they decided to remove the problem, make the child disappear, traumatize the interpreter into silence, close the file. But why tell me she was dead? Why not just say she'd been adopted? Because dead children don't grow up to remember their American translator. Dead children can't ask inconvenient questions about why they were separated from the only person who made them feel safe. The words hit like physical blows. She remembered Amira's small hand gripping hers during intake interviews, the way the little girl would hide behind her legs when strangers approached, how she'd whisper Arabic lullabies to help her sleep. What if everyone you trusted had lied to you about the most important thing in your life? What if the child you saved grew up believing you'd abandon her? Drop a heart in the comments if you've ever felt betrayed by people who were supposed to protect you. You said she's in danger now, Tasha said. What kind of danger? Clayton's jaw tightened. The kind that happens when intelligence assets outlive their usefulness. Amira is 17. Soon she'll be old enough to start asking serious questions about her childhood, about why she has nightmares in English, about why she remembers a woman named Tasha who used to sing to her. So they're going to kill her. They're going to arrange an accident, just like they did with the Khalil family 13 years ago. The plane touched down with a bump that jarred her teeth. Outside, Boston Logan Airport bustled with normal people living normal lives. People who didn't know that children were traded like playing cards in games played by governments. Why are you helping her? Tasha asked as the engines wound down. What's in this for you? For the first time since she'd met him, Clayton's controlled facade cracked. She saw something raw in his eyes, something that looked like old pain. Because I was one of those children, he said quietly. Not a refugee, but a foster kid who got placed with a family connected to defense contracting. They didn't want a son. They wanted access to military intelligence through a child who could grow up and inherit security clearances. The confession hung between them like a bridge she wasn't sure she wanted to cross. I got lucky, he continued. I was smart with computers, valuable enough to keep alive, and angry enough to play their game until I was powerful enough to burn it down from the inside. Is that what we're doing? Burning it down? We're starting with saving one girl. Everything else comes after. Hit that subscribe button if you're ready to discover the truth alongside Tasha. Because what happens next will either save Amira or get them all killed trying. As they prepare to leave the plane, Clayton handed her a new phone and a passport she'd never seen before. Tasha Williams died today, he said. For the next week, you're Sarah Mitchell, cultural consultant for Reeve Tech Industries. She looked at the fake passport, at the woman in the photo who had her face but a different name, a different history. And who are you in this story? I'm the man who's going to help you get your daughter back. The word daughter landed like a key turning in a lock she didn't know existed. Because maybe blood wasn't the only thing that made a family. Maybe love was enough, even when it was complicated by lies and separated by time and measured in the space between a lullaby and a prayer. But as they walked toward customs, neither of them noticed the man with the camera phone who'd been photographing their arrival, or the text message he sent that would change everything. They're here. Both targets confirmed. Initiate Phase 2. She'd mourned a child who wasn't dead, and now that child had grown up missing the woman who'd loved her first. The Boston safe house looked like any other brownstone on Beacon Hill, all red brick and ivy, and the kind of quiet wealth that didn't need to announce itself. But inside, the walls were lined with surveillance equipment and communication devices that probably cost more than most people's houses. Clayton moved through the space like he owned it, which he probably did. Everything about him suggested layers of preparation, years of planning, the kind of patience that came from having unlimited resources and very specific goals. "Sit," he said, gesturing toward a leather couch that faced 3 large monitors. "I need to show you something. What would you do if the government stole your child and called it protection? If they turned love into a weapon and called it national security? Because sometimes saving someone means becoming their enemy first." The first monitor came alive with what looked like school security footage. A cafeteria filled with teenage girls in uniform, all of them laughing and talking in what Tasha now recognized as Arabic. The timestamp showed it was recorded 3 days ago. "There," Clayton said, pointing to a girl at the center table. Tasha's breath caught. Even across thousands of miles and through grainy surveillance video, she would have known those eyes anywhere. Amira had grown into a beautiful teenager, her hair longer now, but still the same dark curls that used to get tangled when she cried. She was animated, gesturing while she talked, clearly the center of her friend group's attention. "She's lovely," Tasha whispered. "She's brilliant," Clayton corrected. "Fluent in Arabic, English, French, and Kurdish. Top of her class in mathematics and literature. According to her teachers, she has an exceptional memory and an unusual interest in American culture." The second monitor displayed what looked like a bedroom. Pink walls covered with posters of American movies and musicians. A desk stacked with books, most of them in English. And on the nightstand, barely visible in the camera's range, was a worn stuffed dolphin that made Tasha's heart stop. "Mr. Flipper," she breathed. "You remember. How could she forget?" She'd bought that dolphin from a gas station on her way to the refugee center, thinking a 4-year-old who'd lost everything might need something soft to hold on to. Amira had clutched it through every interview, every medical exam, every night when the nightmares came. "She still has it," Clayton said. 17 years old, and she still sleeps with a stuffed animal her American translator bought her. Have you ever been lied to by people you trusted to keep you safe? Have you ever discovered that your good intentions were being used against you? Comment below. Should she trust Clayton, or is this all just another manipulation? The third monitor showed something that made Tasha's blood run cold. Official documents in Arabic and English stamped with Syrian government seals. An engagement contract. A marriage license waiting to be signed. "They're planning to marry her off," Clayton said. To a 53-year-old businessman with connections to both the Syrian government and several American defense contractors. She's 17. She'll be 18 next month. Legal marriage age in Syria. And once she's married, she becomes someone else's responsibility. If she dies in a tragic accident after that, it won't trace back to the people who placed her there. Tasha felt sick. How long do we have? The engagement party is tomorrow night. The wedding is scheduled for next week. She stood up, pacing to the window that overlooked Boston Harbor. Somewhere across that water, across an ocean, the little girl she'd loved was being prepared for a life that would destroy her. "I need to see her," Tasha said. "I need to tell her I never abandoned her, that I thought she was dead, that I would have moved heaven and earth to find her if I'd known." "We leave tonight," Clayton said. "But Tasha, you need to understand something. The people who took Amira aren't going to just let us walk away with her. This is going to be dangerous. People are going to get hurt." She turned from the window, and something had changed in her face. The scared waitress from Atlanta was gone. In her place stood someone harder, someone who'd spent 13 years carrying grief that should never have been hers to bear. "Good," she said, "because I've been hurt for 13 years. It's their turn." But what happens when the enemy becomes your greatest ally? What happens when rescue becomes its own trap? Let me know in the comments. Do you think they can save Amira, or are they walking into something much more dangerous? That evening, as they prepared to board another plane, this one bound for a country where Americans weren't particularly welcome, Clayton made a confession that changed everything. "There's something else you need to know," he said, handing her a bulletproof vest that looked like it was designed for a fashion model. Amira wasn't the only child in that program. There were dozens of them, placed all over the world. And for the last 3 years, they've been dying in accidents. How many? 17 so far. Car crashes, drowning, sudden illnesses. All of them between the ages of 16 and 18. All of them right before they would have started asking questions about their childhood. Tasha strapped on the vest and checked the fake passport that would get her into Syria. So this isn't just about saving Amira. This is about stopping a systematic murder program disguised as foreign policy. As their plane lifted off into the night sky, heading toward a reunion 13 years in the making, neither of them spoke about the obvious question: what if they were already too late? But in Damascus, in a bedroom filled with American dreams and Syrian reality, a 17-year-old girl looked at the stuffed dolphin on her nightstand and whispered a prayer in English to a woman she'd never stopped believing would come back for her. Please, Mama Tasha, I am scared. Please find me. Share this video if you believe some bonds can't be broken by distance or time. Because what happens next will either reunite a family or destroy the only hope Amira has left. That night in Boston, she crossed a line she'd drawn 13 years ago and discovered some boundaries are meant to be broken. The safe house felt smaller after midnight. Tasha sat on the couch staring at surveillance photos of Amira, while Clayton worked at his laptop, coordinating their entry into Syria through channels she didn't want to think about too closely. Every few minutes, her phone would buzz with updates from his contacts, flight plans, safe routes, extraction possibilities. All of it felt like preparing for war. We can't just walk into Damascus and grab her, she said, breaking the silence that had stretched between them for the last hour. I know. The people who took her have been planning this for 13 years. They'll be expecting someone to come eventually. I know. So what's the plan? Really? Clayton looked up from his laptop, and she saw exhaustion in his eyes, the kind that came from carrying heavy secrets for too long. The plan is we go in quiet, we get close to her, and we improvise. That's not a plan. That's suicide. You got a better idea? She didn't. That was the problem. 17 years of careful survival instincts were screaming at her to run, to get back on a plane to Atlanta and forget she'd ever heard Clayton Reeves' name. But every time she looked at those photos of Amira, every time she remembered the weight of that little girl's hand in hers, running felt like dying. Sometimes comfort comes from the most unexpected places. Have you ever found solace in a stranger's arms during your darkest moment? Because when grief meets understanding, healing can feel like falling. Tell me about your foster family, she said. The question surprised him. She could see it in the way his shoulders tensed, the way his fingers paused over the keyboard. Why? Because you said you were like her. One of those children. And if we're going to save Amira, I need to understand what we're really fighting. Clayton closed the laptop and walked to the window overlooking the harbor. Boston glittered below them like a jewelry box, all lights and promise, and normal people sleeping in normal beds. The Hendersons, he said finally. Defense contractors based in Colorado. They fostered me when I was 7, adopted me officially when I was 10, told everyone they were saving a poor kid from the system. But they weren't. They were grooming me, making sure I had the right skills, the right connections, the right mindset to be useful later. Private schools, computer training, security clearances as soon as I was old enough. By the time I was 16, I had access to classified systems most adults never see. Tasha joined him at the window. When did you figure it out? When I was 18 and they tried to place me in a government position I was completely unqualified for. That's when I realized I wasn't their son. I was their product. So you burned them down. He smiled, but it was sharp around the edges. I got rich enough to buy them out, then destroyed their company from the inside. Legal, clean, and absolutely devastating. She studied his profile in the window's reflection. Is that what you want to do to the people who took Amira? I want to do worse than that. The honesty in his voice sent heat through her chest. She'd spent 13 years being careful, being invisible, avoiding exactly this kind of dangerous attachment. But standing next to him in the dark, watching him plan to risk everything for a child he'd never met, she felt something crack open inside her that she'd thought was sealed forever. Have you ever felt someone see your worth when you couldn't? When someone treats your pain as if it matters, your anger as if it's justified? Let me know in the comments. What does it mean when someone is willing to fight your battles alongside you? I'm scared, she admitted. Good. Scared keeps you alive. I'm scared of more than dying, Clayton. He turned from the window to look at her directly. What else? I'm scared of hoping. I'm scared of believing this is real, that we might actually save her, that I might get to hold her again and tell her I never stopped loving her. Her voice cracked, and I'm scared of what happens to me if we fail. He moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive but not overwhelming. You won't be alone if we fail, Tasha. Whatever happens, you won't be alone. Promise? Instead of answering with words, he reached up and touched her face, his thumb brushing away a tear she didn't know had fallen. The touch was gentle, careful, like she was something precious that might break. I know what it's like to lose family to lies, he whispered. I know what it's like to spend years wondering if you could have done something different, something more. And I know what it's like to finally find someone who understands that kind of pain. The kiss that followed tasted like shared grief and desperate hope. She pulled him closer, needing to feel alive after drowning in memories of death and loss for so many hours. His hands tangled in her hair as she backed him toward the couch, both of them moving with the kind of urgency that came from knowing tomorrow might not exist. Are you sure? He murmured against her throat as she pulled his shirt over his head. For the first time in 13 years, she gasped, arching into his touch as he lifted her onto the kitchen counter. I'm sure about something. He undressed her like she might disappear if he moved too fast, each touch asking permission. Each kiss a question, she answered with sighs and soft sounds that seemed to surprise them both. When he finally lifted her, carrying her toward the bedroom, she wrapped her legs around his waist and whispered against his ear, "Don't make promises you can't keep." "I won't," he replied, laying her down on sheets that smelled like expensive hotels and dangerous decisions. "But I need you to promise me something too." "What?" "Don't disappear on me again. Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever we find in Damascus, don't run away from this." She looked up at him in the moonlight streaming through the bedroom windows. This man who'd appeared in her restaurant like an answer to a prayer she'd never spoken, who'd turned her entire world upside down in less than 24 hours, and realized she was already in too deep to run. "I promise," she whispered, pulling him down to her. They made love like people preparing for battle, with the kind of desperate tenderness that came from knowing how easily everything could be taken away. And afterward, as they lay tangled in sheets and moonlight, neither of them mentioned the obvious truth, that by morning they'd either be on their way to saving Amira or walking into the most dangerous mistake of their lives. Drop a heart in the comments if you think she's making the right choice. Because sometimes the person who rescues you isn't a hero. They're just someone who's been broken in the same way you have. But at 4 a.m., Clayton's secure phone rang with a call that changed everything. "What is it?" Tasha asked, watching his face go white as he listened. He hung up and turned to her with eyes full of something that looked like panic. "They moved her. Amira's gone, and the family that took her just boarded a plane to Syria. We have 6 hours before she disappears forever." She learned to say goodbye at 16, but at 29, she was done letting people disappear from her life. The private jet cut through clouds somewhere over the Atlantic, while Tasha pressed her face against the window and tried to calculate how much her life had changed in 48 hours. 2 days ago, her biggest worry was covering her section at the restaurant. Now she was racing toward a country where Americans weren't particularly welcome, carrying fake documents and wearing body armor under a designer jacket. Clayton worked his phone like a weapon, calling in favors and making threats in languages she didn't recognize. Every conversation seemed to cost him something: money, political capital, pieces of his carefully constructed privacy. "How much is this costing you?" she asked during a brief pause between calls. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me." He looked up from his screen, and she saw something in his eyes that made her chest tight. "Everything I have, if necessary." "How far would you travel to reclaim what was stolen from you? What would you sacrifice to save someone you love? Because some fights are worth crossing oceans for. But what if the fight puts everyone you care about in danger?" "Tell me about the extraction plan," she said. "We go in as cultural consultants for a medical charity. I have connections with organizations that do legitimate work in Damascus, providing cover for people who need to move through the region quietly. And if we're caught, we won't be. But if we are, Clayton set down his phone and gave her his full attention. If we're caught, the best-case scenario is that we spend the next 10 years in a Syrian prison. The worst-case scenario is that we never make it to prison. She should have been terrified. Every survival instinct she developed living on her own for 13 years should have been screaming at her to turn around, to demand he fly her back to Boston, to disappear back into her small, safe life in Atlanta.
Instead, she felt calmer than she had since this whole nightmare started. Good, she said, because I've been afraid for 13 years. I'm tired of being afraid. Have you ever felt powerless against systems designed to separate families? Have you ever realized that the only way forward is through the thing that scares you most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The plane's communication system chimed with an incoming message that made Clayton's jaw clench as he read it. What is it? Tasha asked. Intelligence update from our contact in Damascus. Amira's engagement party isn't tomorrow night, it's tonight. They moved up the timeline. Why? Because someone told them we were coming. The words hung in the recycled air between them like smoke from a fire they couldn't see. Tasha felt her heart rate spike as the implications sank in. We have a leak. We have a problem, Clayton corrected, but not necessarily a leak. Moving up wedding timelines is standard procedure when intelligence assets become compromised. They're not necessarily expecting us. They're just being careful. Or they're setting a trap. She moved from her seat to sit across from him, close enough to study his face for tells. Are you having second thoughts? Every second since I walked into that restaurant, he admitted. But second thoughts don't change what needs to be done. And what exactly needs to be done? Clayton opened his laptop and showed her satellite images of Damascus, zooming in on a compound in one of the wealthier districts. The engagement party is being held here. Private residence, high walls, limited access points. Security will be tight, but there will be catering staff, musicians, drivers. Chaos we can use to our advantage. How do we get close to Amira? You don't. I'd go in alone as a potential business partner of the groom. You stay at the safe house with our extraction team. Like hell. Tasha, this isn't negotiable. You're not trained for this kind of operation. You could get us all killed. She leaned forward until they were almost nose to nose, close enough that she could see gold flecks in his gray eyes. That little girl has been waiting 13 years for me to come back for her. I'm not staying in a safe house while you risk your life to clean up my mistake. This wasn't your mistake. It was my job to protect her. My responsibility. My failure. And it's my resources, my contacts, my plan, which makes it my operation. The argument might have continued, but Clayton's phone buzzed with an urgent message that drained the color from his face as he read it. Change of plans, he said, showing her the screen. The message was brief, in Arabic, with an English translation below. The girl speaks your name in her sleep. But they're not planning to keep her as daughter. They're planning to sell her as bride. You have 48 hours. Tasha read it twice before the full horror sank in. Sell her. Human trafficking disguised as marriage. Once the ceremony is complete, she becomes property. Legal property, with documentation that would make it almost impossible to trace or recover her. To who? Highest bidder. Someone who wants access to her language skills, her Western education, her American connections. Or someone who just wants to own a beautiful 17-year-old girl and doesn't care where she came from. If this story is hitting you as hard as it's hitting me, smash that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because what happens next will either save Amira or destroy the only hope she has left. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. We're beginning our descent into Ankara, Turkey. From there, you'll transfer to ground transportation for the final leg to Damascus. Weather is clear, but be advised that Syrian airspace is restricted for American aircraft. Tasha looked out the window at the lights of Turkey spreading below them, then at Clayton preparing weapons she didn't want to think about too closely. One more question, she said. What? When this is over, when we have Amir safe, what happens to us? He paused in his preparations, his hands stilling on what looked like a very sophisticated communication device. What do you want to happen? I want to believe that some good things last. That not everything beautiful gets destroyed by the people with more power than conscience. Clayton reached across the narrow space between their seats and took her hand. Then let's make sure this is one of the good things that lasts. But as the plane touched down in Ankara, neither of them mentioned what they both knew, that in less than 12 hours, everything they'd found together would either be tested by fire or destroyed completely. And in Damascus, a 17-year-old girl stared at her reflection in a mirror while strange women prepared her for a party that would decide the rest of her life, and whispered a prayer in English to a woman she'd never stopped believing would come back for her. "Please, Mama Tasha, I can feel you getting closer. Please don't let them take me away from you again." After 13 years, she heard a voice call her name and remembered what love sounds like in Arabic. The compound walls in Damascus stretched 12 feet high and topped with razor wire that caught moonlight like broken glass. Security cameras tracked their movement from 3 different angles as Clayton and Tasha approached the service entrance, dressed as catering staff for a medical supply company that probably existed only in very expensive paperwork. "Remember," Clayton murmured as they joined the line of legitimate workers entering for the evening's event, "you're Layla Hassan, my translator. You speak when spoken to, keep your head down, and do not engage with anyone unless I'm standing right next to you. And if I see her, you don't see her until I give the signal. We have one chance at this, Tasha. One chance before they realize we're not who we're pretending to be. What if the child you saved grew up to save you in return? Have you ever experienced a reunion that felt like coming back to life? Because some love transcends time, distance, and deception." The service entrance led through a kitchen that buzzed with organized chaos. Women in hijabs and aprons prepared trays of food, while men in black suits spoke into earpieces, their eyes constantly scanning the room. The air smelled like lamb and roses and danger. Tasha followed Clayton through the controlled mayhem, carrying a tray of appetizers that her hands were shaking too badly to hold steady. Every face she passed could belong to someone who'd spent 13 years lying to a little girl about why her American family had abandoned her. Every voice she heard might have whispered reassurances while planning to sell her to the highest bidder. They moved through the main house like ghosts with expensive catering uniforms. The walls were covered with art that probably cost more than most people made in a lifetime, but all Tasha could focus on was the sound of young women laughing somewhere deeper in the compound. "Second floor," Clayton whispered. "Third door on the right. That's where they'll be preparing her." "How do you know?" "Because that's what the blueprints say, and I've paid too much money for them to be wrong." But what happens when rescue becomes its own trap? What happens when the people hunting you are always one step ahead? Drop a comment if you think they're walking into something bigger than they realize. The staircase was marble and gold, the kind of expensive that whispered about old money and older secrets. Tasha's footsteps echoed despite her efforts to move quietly, and every sound seemed loud enough to bring security running. At the top of the stairs, Clayton held up his hand for her to stop. Voices drifted from behind the third door, women speaking rapid Arabic, something about jewelry and makeup and how beautiful the bride looked. "Amira," one of them said, and Tasha's heart almost stopped. "Stand still, Habibti. The necklace won't clasp if you keep moving." "I don't want to wear it," came the reply in English, and Tasha had to grab the banister to keep from falling. The voice was older now, deeper, but unmistakably the same little girl who'd cried for her American translator 13 years ago. "You'll wear what your family chooses," said another voice, older and sharper. "Tonight is not about what you want." Clayton caught Tasha's arm as she started forward. "Wait," he mouthed. "Not yet." But through the crack in the door, she could see a slice of the room beyond. Mirrors and silk and women in expensive dresses surrounding a figure in white who was trying very hard not to cry. And then she saw her. Amira had grown into everything Tasha had dreamed she would become. Tall and graceful, with intelligence shining in her dark eyes and strength in the way she held her shoulders despite being surrounded by people who were treating her like property. The white dress was beautiful and traditional and completely wrong for a 17-year-old who should have been worrying about prom dates and college applications instead of forced marriage to a man old enough to be her grandfather. "I need to use the bathroom," Amira said in Arabic. "You just went," replied one of the women. "I need to go again." "Hold it. We're almost finished." I'm going to be sick. The older woman sighed with frustration. Fine, 5 minutes. But if you try anything foolish, the consequences will be severe. Have you ever felt someone watching you with love you thought you'd lost forever? Have you ever heard your name spoken by someone you thought was gone? Because sometimes miracles sound like ordinary conversations until you realize you're living inside one. The bathroom door opened and closed. Clayton counted to 10, then motioned for Tasha to follow him down the hallway. The bathroom was the fourth door, and when they reached it, he knocked softly, 3 quick taps, then 2, then 3 again. The door opened a crack, and Amira's face appeared in the gap. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The world stopped turning while 17 years of separation collapsed into a single heartbeat of recognition. Mama Tasha, Amira whispered in English. Hello, baby girl, Tasha whispered back. And then Amira was in her arms, crying against her shoulder in a mixture of Arabic and English while 13 years of grief and hope and desperate love poured out of both of them at once. I knew you were alive, Amira sobbed. I knew you didn't leave me on purpose. I knew you'd come back. I thought you were dead, Tasha cried, holding her tight enough to make sure she was real, warm, breathing. They told me you died. They told me you were gone, but I never stopped loving you. We have to move, Clayton said quietly. They'll notice she's been gone too long. But Amira pulled back to look at Tasha's face, her hands framing her cheeks like she was memorizing every detail. You came for me, she said in Arabic. You crossed an ocean to come for me. I would have crossed 100 oceans, Tasha replied in the same language. I would have moved mountains. I would have torn down governments. You might have to, Clayton interrupted, because footsteps were approaching in the hallway. Ladies, we need to leave. Now, let me know in the comments. What would you risk to save someone you love? Because what happens next will test every boundary they thought they understood about sacrifice, loyalty, and the price of family. As they prepared to escape through a window that led to a fire escape Clayton had scouted earlier, Amira grabbed Tasha's hand and whispered something that changed everything. Mama Tasha, I know why they really took me. My birth father isn't just any government official. He's the Syrian minister who approved all of Clayton's contracts. This was never about adoption or marriage. This was about leverage against both of you. The footsteps in the hallway were getting closer, and somewhere in the compound, men were starting to shout. Their cover was blown, their escape route was compromised, and the person they'd come to save had just revealed that everything they thought they knew about this mission was wrong. Move, Clayton said, pushing them toward the window. Move now, or we all die here. She thought she was rescuing a child, until she discovered the child was bait in a game between governments. The fire escape rattled under their weight as they climbed down into the Damascus night, sirens already wailing in the distance. Amira moved like someone who'd been planning her own escape for months, quick and sure-footed despite the formal dress that should have slowed her down. This way, Clayton whispered, leading them through narrow alleys that smelled like spices and exhaust fumes. Safe house is 6 blocks north. But Tasha couldn't stop staring at the girl running beside her. 17 years old and already carrying secrets that could topple governments. Already understanding that love could be used as a weapon and family could be the most dangerous trap of all. How long have you known? Tasha asked as they pressed against a building wall, waiting for a police car to pass. About my father? Since I was 15, Amira replied in perfect English. About you and Clayton being connected? Since yesterday, when they told me about the engagement party and mentioned that my American translator had finally been located. What happens when love becomes a weapon in someone else's war? Have you ever discovered that your good intentions were being used against you? Because sometimes the people we're trying to save are protecting us instead. They reached the safe house as dawn was breaking over the city. It was a small apartment above a bakery, the kind of place that looked entirely ordinary from the outside, but had reinforced walls and communication equipment that probably cost more than the building itself. Clayton immediately went to work on his encrypted laptop, while Tasha helped Amira out of the wedding dress and into clothes that would let her move freely. But even in jeans and a t-shirt, Even with her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, she carried herself like someone who'd been forced to grow up too fast. "Tell us everything," Tasha said, sitting beside her on the narrow couch. Amira took a deep breath, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of someone who'd been keeping dangerous secrets for too long. "My birth father is Khalil Assad, Syrian Minister of Information. But more importantly, he's the man who's been approving all the contracts that let American companies operate in this region for the last 15 years. Clayton looked up from his laptop. "Including mine, especially yours. Do you want to know how much money your company has made from Syrian contracts since 2010? I'm afraid to ask. $400 million. All of it approved personally by the man whose daughter you just kidnapped." The word kidnapped hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. Because that's what this was, wasn't it? Not a rescue, not a reunion. A kidnapping that would be used to justify whatever retaliation the Syrian government chose to unleash. Have you ever realized that your rescue attempt was actually walking into someone else's trap? Comment below. Who do you think is really pulling the strings here? "They wanted you to find me," Amira continued. "They wanted you to come here, to take me, to give them a reason to cancel every American contract in the region and blame it on corporate terrorism." "But why?" Tasha asked. "Why go through all this trouble when they could have just canceled the contracts anyway?" "Because this way, they get to keep the money they've already been paid and cancel future obligations. This way, they look like victims instead of contract violators. This way, they can seize all American assets in Syria and call it justified retaliation." Clayton's fingers flew over his keyboard, pulling up financial records and contract details that painted a picture of just how completely they'd been played. "Jesus," he breathed. "If they cancel our contracts and seize our assets, you'll lose everything," Amira finished. "Your company, your personal wealth, your government connections. Everything. What about you?" Tasha asked. "What happens to you in all this?" Amira's smile was bitter and far too old for her 17 years. "I become a martyr. The poor Syrian girl who was kidnapped by American criminals and tragically killed during the rescue attempt. Very sad, very politically useful. The full scope of their manipulation was starting to become clear, and it was worse than anything Tasha had imagined. Not only had they walked into a trap, but they'd brought the bait with them. "We have to get you out of the country," Clayton said. "That's what they're expecting," Amira replied. "Every border, every airport, every smuggling route will be watched. They want you to run so they can catch you in the act and make this look even worse. So what do? We do something they're not expecting." Amira stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city where she'd grown up as a political asset instead of a daughter. "We go public. We tell the truth about the adoption program, about the children who were traded for intelligence, about the systematic murder of assets who outlived their usefulness." "That's suicide," Clayton said. "Maybe, but it's also the only way to save the other children who are still trapped in the system. What price are you willing to pay for the truth? What would you sacrifice to expose corruption that's destroying innocent lives?" Share your thoughts below, because what Amira suggests next will either save them all or get them killed. But before anyone could respond, Clayton's secure phone rang with a call that made his face go white. "Who is it?" Tasha asked. "The Syrian Ministry of Information," he said, staring at the caller ID. "They want to talk." The phone kept ringing, each tone like a countdown to whatever came next. And Amira, 17 years old and already understanding the game better than the adults who'd been playing it for decades, looked at the two people who'd risked everything to save her and said the words that would change everything. "Answer it. It's time they learned that their bait has teeth." But as Clayton reached for the phone, footsteps sounded in the hallway outside the safe house, and someone began pounding on the door with the kind of authority that didn't plan to wait for an invitation. They'd found them, and now the real game was about to begin. People say love bridges different worlds, but nobody tells you how terrifying it is to stand in the middle, wondering if the bridge will hold. The pounding on the door stopped. 3 seconds of silence that felt like hours. Then a voice called out in accented English. "Mr. Reeve, we know you're inside. We'd like to discuss terms." Clayton looked at his laptop screen, which was flashing warnings about security breaches and compromised locations. Amira moved to the window and peered through the blinds of the street below, where black cars with government plates had blocked both ends of the narrow alley. "How many?" Tasha whispered.
"Enough," Amira replied grimly. "But they're not here to arrest us. If they wanted us dead or captured, they wouldn't be knocking politely. Have you ever felt like you were living in two different worlds at once? When the life you thought you knew collides with secrets you never imagined? Because sometimes the most dangerous negotiations happen when everyone in the room is pretending to be something they're not." Clayton walked to the door, but didn't open it. "What kind of terms?" he called out. "The kind that let everyone walk away from this situation with something they want," came the reply. "I believe you have something that belongs to Syria. Syria has something that belongs to you." "Like what?" "Like your freedom, your company, your life." Tasha moved closer to Amira, instinctively protective despite knowing the 17-year-old was probably better equipped to handle this crisis than anyone else in the room. "They're offering a trade," Amira said quietly. "Me for everything else." "That's not happening," Tasha said immediately. "It might be our only option." "It's not an option at all." But Clayton was already thinking like a businessman, weighing costs and benefits and acceptable losses. "What guarantee do we have that you'll honor any agreement?" he called through the door. "The same guarantee you have that I won't simply order my men to break down this door and settle this matter with bullets instead of words." How do you negotiate when the other side holds all the cards? Well, the person you're trying to save understands the game better than you do. Comment below. What would you do in Clayton's position? Clayton looked at Tasha and Amira, both of whom were watching him with expressions he couldn't quite read. In the last 3 days, he'd gone from reclusive billionaire to international kidnapper to whatever he was about to become next. 5 minutes, he called out. "Let me discuss this with my associates." 5 minutes. "Then we're coming in whether you open the door or not." The helicopter blades cut through Boston air like knives. Tasha pressed her face against the window, watching the city shrink below them. Clayton sat across from her, his jaw tight, phone pressed to his ear. "No, Senator Morrison. The deal is off. Permanently." His voice carried weight that made government officials tremble. But right now, all Tasha could think about was that photo. The little girl, Amara. "Clayton." Her voice cracked. "Where is she?" He ended the call and looked at her. Really looked, like he was seeing her for the first time. "She's safe. That's all that matters right now." "Safe from what?" "From who?" The helicopter banked left, heading toward a private airfield. Through the headset, she heard the pilot. "Landing in 5 minutes, sir." Clayton reached across the small space and took her hand. His palm was warm, steady. Everything she needed right now. 13 years ago, you saved that little girl's life. You didn't just translate for her family. You hid her when the deportation agents came. You gave her your social security card so she could get into school. Tasha's breath caught. "How do you know that?" "Because I was the one funding the legal defense for her family. My foundation, my money, my lawyers." The world tilted, not just from the helicopter descent. "You were watching me back then?" "No." His thumb traced across her knuckles. "I was watching her, making sure she stayed safe. But you were always there, always protecting her. I started watching you instead." Have you ever learned that everything you thought you knew about your life was wrong? That moment when reality shifts and nothing makes sense anymore? The helicopter touched down with a soft thud. Through the windows, Tasha saw a black SUV waiting. 2 men in suits standing beside it. Who are they? Protection. Clayton unbuckled his harness. "Tasha, what I'm about to tell you changes everything. About us. About why I found you at that restaurant. About why that photo exists." She wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at her to unbuckle and bolt. But his eyes held her steady. "Tell me, Amara isn't just some refugee you helped years ago. She's my daughter." The words hit like a punch to the chest. The helicopter engine wound down, and in the sudden quiet, her heartbeat sounded like thunder. "Your daughter. Biological. Her mother was Algerian. We were involved when I was working overseas contracts. She died in a bombing. Amara was the only survivor." Tasha's mind raced. The pieces clicked together like puzzle parts she'd been carrying for years without knowing. "The man who raised me. My stepfather, Kareem. Clayton nodded slowly. Was her grandfather. He took her in when the state couldn't find any other family. But he was too old, too sick to care for a traumatized child alone. So I helped. I was just a neighbor girl who spoke Arabic. You were everything. You became her sister, her protector, her world. The SUV door opened. One of the men in suits approached the helicopter. Mr. Reeve, we need to move. The situation has escalated. Clayton squeezed her hand. Tasha, there's more. The government contract that's being threatened? It's a $20 billion aid package for refugee families. Families like Amara's. If this gets exposed the wrong way, if they find out about my connection to her, about the adoption paperwork I falsified to keep her safe, they'll shut it down. They'll destroy it. And every family, depending on that aid, will suffer. She looked out at the waiting car, at the men with their serious faces and hidden weapons. Her quiet life, serving coffee and speaking Arabic to confuse customers, felt like another lifetime. Where is she now? Mit. Full scholarship. Pre-Amid. She wants to be a doctor. Pride swelled in Tasha's chest. The little girl who used to hide behind her legs, who cried when she heard sirens because they reminded her of the bombing. That little girl was going to save lives. Does she know about you? About us? Clayton's smile was soft, almost shy. She knows I'm her father. She doesn't know about you yet. That's up to you. The suit knocked on the window. Time to move. Clayton, if we do this, if we face whatever's coming, what happens to us? His hand moved to her cheek, thumb brushing away a tear she didn't know she'd shed. That depends on whether you trust me enough to find out. Do you believe in second chances? In the idea that some people come into your life at exactly the right moment, even if it takes 13 years to understand why. She kissed him then, right there in the helicopter with government agents waiting outside and her whole life hanging in the balance. His lips were warm, desperate, full of promises he hadn't made with words. When they broke apart, her decision was made. Let's go get our daughter back. Like this story? Comment below about a time someone from your past surprised you with a secret that changed everything. And don't forget to subscribe. You won't believe what happens when Tasha and Clayton finally face the people who've been hunting them. The safe house looked like every other townhouse in Georgetown. Red brick, black shutters, the kind of place politicians' wives shopped for antiques. Inside was different. Bulletproof windows, hidden cameras, men with earpieces stationed at every door. Tasha sat across from director Helen Walsh, the woman who'd been tracking her for 3 months. Walsh was smaller than she'd expected, sharper, like a blade wrapped in a business suit. Ms. Coleman, thank you for coming. Did I have a choice? Walsh smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Mr. Reeve certainly gave you one. He could have kept you hidden indefinitely. The fact that he brought you here tells me something important. Clayton leaned forward from his chair beside Tasha. It tells you that we want this settled. Cleanly. What it tells me, Walsh said, opening a thick file, is that you're both in deeper than you realized. She slid a photograph across the table. Tasha's breath caught. It was Amara, recent, walking across what looked like a college campus, backpack slung over one shoulder, laughing with friends. Beautiful girl. Brilliant, too. Her professors rave about her. Did you know she's already been accepted to Johns Hopkins for her residency? Pediatric surgery. Tasha's throat tightened. What do you want? The same thing you do. To protect her. Walsh pulled out more photos. These were older, grainier, security camera footage. This is from 13 years ago. A detention facility outside Detroit. Notice anything? In the photo, a younger Tasha led a small girl through what looked like a back door. Emergency exit. You helped her escape federal custody. That's a felony. Clayton's voice went cold. She was 8 years old. Traumatized. Alone. She was scheduled for deportation. Due process, Mr. Reeve. Due process. Tasha stood up so fast her chair scraped the floor. She watched her mother die in a bombing. She hadn't eaten in 3 days because she was too scared to leave her room. Due process was going to send her back to a country that didn't exist anymore. Walsh didn't flinch. Sit down, Ms. Coleman. Have you ever felt rage, so pure it burnt? When someone talks about a child like they're just paperwork. Tasha stayed standing. What do you really want? Because if this is about punishing me for helping a little girl 13 years ago, you're wasting everyone's time. This is about national security. Walsh pulled out another file. Thicker, marked with red stamps. 3 weeks ago, our intelligence services intercepted communications suggesting that someone was using refugee aid networks to funnel money to terrorist organizations. The investigation led us to a very interesting discovery. She opened the file. Financial records, bank transfers, names Tasha recognized from her stepfather's old friends. Your stepfather, Kareem Ben Ali, wasn't just taking in refugee children out of kindness. He was part of a network, moving money, moving people. Some of those people weren't refugees at all. Clayton's hand found Tasha's arm, gently pulling her back to her seat. What are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you facts. Kareem Ben Ali was under surveillance for 2 years before he died. The network he was part of moved over $50 million through charitable organizations. Tasha felt sick. Kareem would never, maybe not knowingly, but someone was using him. Using his legitimate work with refugees as cover for something else. Walsh leaned back in her chair, studying them both. Here's what we know. Amara's adoption was fast-tracked through channels that shouldn't exist. Her paperwork was falsified, not just the identity documents, but her entire legal status. Someone with serious government connections made her disappear from the system and reappear as an American citizen. Clayton's jaw was tight. And that same someone has been funding a $20 billion aid package that's now under investigation. If we find evidence that terrorist money influenced that aid package, even indirectly, it gets shut down. Permanently. The room went quiet except for the hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of DC traffic. Tasha understood now. You think Clayton was part of this network. You think he used dirty money to help Amara. I think Mr. Reeve is either incredibly unlucky or incredibly careful. And I'm about to find out which. Walsh pulled out one more photograph. This one made Tasha's blood freeze. It was recent. Yesterday, maybe. Amara leaving what looked like a coffee shop near MIT. But she wasn't alone. Walking beside her was a man Tasha recognized. Older now, grayer, but definitely familiar. Uncle Tariq, she whispered. Tariq Al-Hassan, your stepfather's brother. Also part of the network we've been investigating. Also supposed to be dead for the last 5 years. Clayton grabbed the photo. Where was this taken? Cambridge. Yesterday afternoon. He's been watching her, Mr. Reeve. For months. Do you know what it feels like when your past and present collide in the worst possible way? When the people you trusted turn out to be strangers. Tasha couldn't breathe. Uncle Tariq had been like family. He'd taught her Arabic pronunciation when she was struggling. He brought gifts on holidays. He'd also disappeared one day when she was 16. Kareem said he'd gone back to Algeria. Family emergency. What does he want with her? Walsh closed the file. That's what we're going to find out. Together. Together? Ms. Coleman, Mr. Reeve, you have 48 hours to help us end this. Cleanly. Quietly. In a way that protects Amara and preserves the aid package. Clayton stood up. And if we refuse, then I arrest you both for conspiracy, fraud, and terrorist financing. Amara gets pulled into protective custody, and every refugee family, depending on that aid package, loses everything. Tasha looked at Clayton, then back at Walsh. What do you need us to do? Think someone from your past could be hiding dangerous secrets? Share your thoughts below and hit subscribe, because what Tasha discovers about Uncle Tariq in the next episode will shock you. MIT's campus looked peaceful in the late afternoon sun. Students hurried between buildings, backpacks full of dreams and textbooks. Normal college life. Nothing about this felt normal. Tasha adjusted the tiny microphone taped behind her ear. Across the quad, she spotted Clayton pretending to read a newspaper on a bench. 2 blocks away, Director Walsh and her team waited in unmarked vans. Remember, Walsh's voice crackled through the earpiece. We need him to admit his current plans. Not the past. What he wants with Amara now. Tasha's palms were sweating. She hadn't seen Uncle Tariq in 10 years, but she'd know him anywhere. The way he walked with his left shoulder slightly raised. The habit of checking his watch every few minutes. There, coming out of the library. He looked older, thinner, But when he spotted her sitting on the steps where they'd agreed to meet, his face lit up with genuine joy. "Habibti, sweetheart." He opened his arms like nothing had changed. She stood, but didn't step into the embrace. "Hello, uncle." His arms dropped. The joy flickered, replaced by something careful. "You're upset with me. You've been dead for 5 years. I'm a little confused." He glanced around the busy campus, then sat heavily on the steps beside her. Students walked past, laughing and arguing about assignments. Normal people with normal problems. "I had to disappear, Tasha, for everyone's safety." "From what?" "From people who wanted to use what I knew against innocent families." His English was still accented, but precise. The same voice that had read her bedtime stories when Kareem was too tired. "Tell me about Amara." Uncle Tariq's hands twisted together. "She's beautiful, isn't she? Smart like her mother was." "You knew her mother?" "Layla was my student back in Algiers. Before the trouble started. She was studying to be a teacher." He smiled sadly. "She will be so proud." Tasha felt the microphone against her ear, recording every word. "Is that why you've been watching her? Because you knew her mother?" "I've been protecting her." "There's a difference." "From who?" Uncle Tariq stood up, pacing a few steps away. Two girls walked past, speaking rapid Spanish about an upcoming exam. "Do you remember what I taught you about family, Habibti? That family takes care of family. Always. No matter what the cost." He turned back to her, and for the first time, she saw how tired he looked. How much older than his 58 years. "Amara is in danger. Not from the government. Not from people like Director Walsh, who think they understand what's happening." Tasha's heart skipped. "How do you know about Walsh?" "Because I've been watching you too. Since the moment Clayton Reeve walked into your restaurant." "Do you ever feel like everyone around you knows secrets you don't? Like you're the last person to understand your own life?" "Uncle Tariq, what's really going on?" He sat back down, closer this time. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Clayton's company has been targeted. Not by the government. By the same people who killed Layla 13 years ago." "What people?" "Arms dealers. Men who profit from keeping countries unstable. They've been using refugee networks to move weapons and money for years." Tasha's blood went cold. "Using how?" "They find legitimate aid organizations. Good people doing good work. Then they slip dirty money into the funding streams. When the authorities investigate, they find the dirty money and shut down the legitimate work. The aid package. $20 billion that could feed families, build schools, provide medical care. If it gets canceled because of a terrorist financing investigation, those families suffer. And the arms dealers win." Uncle Tariq pulled out his phone, showing her a photo that made her stomach drop. It was Clayton's office building in Wyoming. But the photo was taken from inside a car, through crosshairs drawn onto the image. They've been planning to kill him for months. Make it look like a suicide. Guilty conscience over terrorist financing. And Amara? Insurance. They know Clayton cares about her. If killing him doesn't work, they'll threaten her. Tasha thought about the little girl who used to hide behind her legs during thunderstorms. Now someone wanted to use her as leverage. "Why didn't you go to the police?" "The FBI?" Uncle Tariq laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Because the man leading this operation used to work for the CIA. He has friends in high places. And because..." He hesitated. "Because they told me they'd kill you if I talked." Everything clicked. The 10-year disappearance. The fake death. Uncle Tariq hadn't been hiding from the law. He'd been hiding from killers. "What do they want you to do?" "Get Amara alone. Away from campus security. They'll grab her, use her to control Clayton, then kill them both." Tasha stood up, her legs shaking. "You won't do it." "Of course not. But I had to make them think I would, long enough to figure out how to stop them." "Ow!" Uncle Tariq reached into his jacket. For a split second, Tasha tensed, but he pulled out an envelope. "Names, addresses, bank account numbers. Everything I've collected over the past 5 years. Evidence that will put them away forever." He pressed it into her hands. "Give this to Director Walsh." "But not yet." "Why not?" "Because tonight, they expect me to deliver Amara to them. If I don't show up, or if they suspect I betrayed them, they'll disappear. Find new targets. Hurt other families." Tasha understood. "You want to catch them in the act. I want to end this. Forever." Across the quad, Clayton was still pretending to read his paper. Students continued walking past, worried about exams and dating and summer jobs. Normal problems. Normal lives. What do you need me to do? Uncle Tarek smiled then, the same warm smile from her childhood. Trust me one more time, Habibdi. And forgive an old man for the lies he had to tell to keep you safe. Have you ever had to choose between your own safety and protecting someone you love? Comment below and subscribe. You won't believe the heart-stopping finale that's coming next. The warehouse smelled like motor oil and fear. Tasha crouched behind a shipping container, heart hammering against her ribs. Through the gaps in the metal siding, she could see the setup. 3 black SUVs arranged in a triangle. Men with guns positioned at every exit. Uncle Tarek stood in the center, checking his.
Where is she? The voice belonged to Marcus Webb, former CIA operative turned arms dealer. Tasha had studied his photo until she could pick him out of a crowd. She's coming. College students don't move fast. Webb stepped closer to Uncle Tarek, and even from her hiding spot, Tasha could see the tension in both men's shoulders. If you're lying to me, old man, relax. She trusts me. Always has. Clayton's voice came through her earpiece. Teams are in position. Walsh says to wait for her signal. But Tasha couldn't wait. Not when she heard footsteps approaching the warehouse entrance. Real footsteps. Not part of the plan. Through the crack in the door, she saw Amara walking toward the warehouse, backpack over her shoulder, looking confused but not scared. The plan was falling apart. Amara wasn't supposed to be here. The decoy they'd arranged should have been in place by now. Clayton, she whispered into her mic, Amara's here. The real Amara. His response was immediate. What? That's impossible. But it wasn't impossible. It was happening. Webb's men moved into position as Amara approached Uncle Tarek. Her smile was bright, trusting. She had no idea she was walking into a trap. Uncle Tarek, your text said it was urgent. He turned toward her, and Tasha saw the moment his act crumbled. The professional calm replaced by panic. Amara, no. You need to leave. Now. What's wrong? Webb stepped out of the shadows, gun drawn but held low. Nothing's wrong, sweetheart. We just need to have a conversation. Do you know what terror feels like? When someone you love is in danger and you can't do anything to stop it? Amara took a step backward, finally understanding. Uncle Tarek, I am sorry, Habibti. I try to protect you. Tasha couldn't wait for Walsh's signal. Couldn't wait for backup. Couldn't watch Amara get hurt because of choices made 13 years ago. She stood up from behind the container. Let her go. Every gun in the warehouse swung toward her. Webb smiled like he'd been expecting this. Tasha Coleman, the famous waitress who speaks Arabic. I've been looking forward to meeting you. You've got me. Let her go. How about both of you? Even better. Amara's voice was small, scared. Tasha, what's happening? Before she could answer, Clayton appeared at the warehouse entrance. Novak, no taktikilgir. Just him, walking calmly toward the guns like he was strolling into a boardroom. Gentlemen, let's talk business. Webb laughed. Clayton Reeve, the man of the hour. You're early. Traffic was light. Clayton's eyes found Tasha's across the warehouse. In that look, she saw everything. Love, regret, determination, and a plan. He'd positioned himself between Webb's men and the entrance, drawing their attention, giving Walsh's team a clear shot at the back exits. Here's how this works, Webb said, gun now pointed directly at Amara. You transfer $40 billion to these accounts. He held up a tablet. Your entire net worth. Every company, every asset, every penny. And then you all die anyway. But the girl dies last, so she gets to watch. The warehouse went quiet except for the distant sound of Boston traffic. Clayton stepped closer. Counteroffer. You're not in a position to negotiate. Sure I am. He pulled out his phone, thumb hovering over the screen. One touch, and every financial transaction you've made in the last 5 years gets uploaded to the FBI's database. Account numbers, shell companies, weapons purchases. Everything. Webb's smile faltered. You're bluffing. Am I? Uncle Tara caught Tasha's eye across the warehouse. He mouthed one word, duck. She grabbed Amara and pulled her down behind a crate, just as Uncle Tarek lunged at Webb. Gunfire erupted. Shouting, The crash of metal against concrete. When the noise stopped, Tasha lifted her head. Clayton was on the ground, blood spreading across his shirt. No. She scrambled toward him, not caring about the guns or the danger or anything except reaching him. He was conscious, breathing. But the blood? I'm okay, he whispered. It looks worse than it is. Webb was down too, Uncle Tarek standing over him with a man's own gun. It's over, Uncle Tarek said. All of it. Walsh's voice crackled through the earpiece. All clear. Medics are coming in. Tasha pressed her hands against Clayton's wound, trying to stop the bleeding. Don't you dare die on me. Not planning on it. His voice was weak, but steady. We've got a daughter to raise. Amara knelt beside them, tears streaming down her face. Tasha? Is he? He's your father, sweetheart, and he's going to be fine. Clayton's hand found hers, warm despite everything. Marry me. What? Right now? Before the ambulance gets here. In case. You're delirious from blood loss. I'm serious. I've been waiting 13 years to ask. Tasha looked at Amara, who was crying and laughing at the same time. Say yes, Amara whispered. Please say yes. Do you believe in love that's worth dying for? In families that choose each other instead of being born into each other? Tasha kissed Clayton's forehead, tasting salt and fear and hope. Yes. Drop a heart in the comments if you believe in love like this, and subscribe for the incredible conclusion. You won't believe how this family story ends. 6 months later, the Lebanese restaurant in downtown Atlanta looked exactly the same. Same red vinyl booths. Same faded photographs of Beirut on the walls. Same smell of cumin and coffee. But everything was different. Tasha stood behind the counter, Arabic dictionary open beside the cash register, helping train the new waitress. Her ring caught the afternoon sunlight, streaming through the windows. Simple platinum band, nothing flashy. Clayton had insisted on something practical. Just say Allen wa Sahlan, she explained patiently. It means welcome. Don't worry about perfect pronunciation. Maria, the new girl, tried the words carefully. Her accent was thick with Puerto Rican Spanish, but her Arabic was improving. Like this. Perfect. The bell above the door chimed. Clayton walked in, still moving carefully from where the bullet had nicked his ribs. He'd refused bodyguards, but Tasha noticed he always checked the street before entering anywhere. How's my favorite waitress? Your only waitress. She kissed him over the counter. How did the meeting go? The aid package is approved. Full funding. 50,000 refugee families are about to get help. He sat at the counter, same stool where he'd left that first note 6 months ago. The note that changed everything. And the other thing, Clayton's smile was softer now. Amara got the internship. Johns Hopkins want her for their pediatric surgery program. Tasha felt pride swell in her chest. The little girl who used to hide behind her legs was going to be a doctor. The door chimed again. This time, it was Uncle Tarek, looking healthier than he had in years. Witness protection suited him. He traded his old identity for a new life as a consultant for the State Department's refugee services. Assalamu alaikum, family. Wa alaikum assalam, Tasha replied, hugging him across the counter. Have you ever felt like your life finally made sense? Like all the pieces you'd been carrying separately suddenly fit together into something beautiful? The restaurant was busier these days. Word had spread about the waitress who spoke perfect Arabic, the billionaire who ate lunch there every day, and a family that had formed in the most unlikely way. But today was special. Today was the day they'd been planning for weeks. At 3 o'clock, the door opened one more time. Amara walked in, graduation cap still slightly crooked from the ceremony, medical degree rolled up in her hand. She'd driven straight from Cambridge, too excited to wait. Dr. Amara Reeve, Clayton said, standing to embrace his daughter. How does it feel? Terrifying. Amazing. Perfect. She turned to Tasha, and for a moment, they were both 17 and 8 years old again. The big sister and little sister who'd found each other in a house that smelled like cardamom and sorrow. I have something for you, Amara said. She pulled out a small wrap box. Inside was a necklace, delicate gold chain with a pendant in the shape of 2 interlocking circles. It's Lebanese. The symbol means family by choice. Tasha's eyes filled. Amara, you saved my life when I was 8. You saved it again 6 months ago. And now you're going to be my mom for real. The adoption papers were already filed. At 21, Amara was legally an adult, but she'd insisted on making it official. The Reeve family was complete. Clayton cleared his throat. Actually, there's one more thing. He pulled out his own small box. Not a ring box. They were already married, courthouse ceremony with Uncle Tarek as witness. This was different. Inside were keys. Keys to what? The house in Dearborn, where you grew up. I bought it back from the current owners. Tasha stared at the keys, memories flooding back. The kitchen where Kareem had taught her to make kafta. The bedroom where she'd studied Arabic late into the night. The front steps where she'd first held Amara's hand. Why? Because that's where our story really started. And because Amara wants to open a free clinic there. For refugee families who can't afford medical care. Amara nodded eagerly. Pediatric surgery for kids who need it. No questions asked about documentation or insurance. Just help. And because Clayton continued, I thought we could spend summers there, when we're not traveling to visit aid projects around the world. The three of them stood in the restaurant that had brought them together, surrounded by the smell of home and the sound of languages mixing like ingredients in a recipe. Uncle Tarek raised his coffee cup. To family by choice. To second chances, Clayton added. To coming home, Tasha whispered. They clinked glasses, coffee cups, and water glasses, and whatever they could reach, while Maria watched from behind the counter, smiling even though she probably didn't understand everything that was happening. Outside, Atlanta traffic moved past the windows. People heading home from work, picking up children, meeting friend for dinner. Normal lives with normal problems. Inside, three people who'd found each other across languages and years and impossible circumstances sat together, planning a future none of them could have imagined. So what happens now? Amara asked. Tasha looked at her husband, at their daughter, at the man who'd been like a father to her for so many years. At the life they'd built from love and loss and the courage to trust each other. Now we get back to work. Do you believe in families that choose each other? In love that crosses every boundary? In the idea that sometimes the best stories start with a simple act of kindness, like speaking Arabic to strangers in a restaurant? Clayton reached across the table and took her hand, the same way he had that first day in the helicopter when her whole world was falling apart. Ready for the next adventure, Mrs. Reeve? Tasha squeezed his fingers, looking around at the family they'd created from hope and stubbornness and the belief that everyone deserves to be safe. I've been ready for 13 years. Thank you for following Tasha, Clayton, and Amara's incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who believes in the power of chosen family. Subscribe for more amazing, true-to-life stories that prove love really can conquer everything. And remember, sometimes the people who change your life are sitting right across the restaurant, waiting for you to notice them.